It's nice.
Welcome to this new book news reading, celebrating books published during the pandemic lockdown. My name is Karen Schubert, and I'm the director of Lit Youngstown, a community-based literary arts nonprofit in Northeast Ohio. The new book news series receives support from the Natalie and James Andrews Foundation. I would like to invite you to the last new book news reading next Sunday, May 2nd, featuring Genevieve Kaplan, Jennifer Sperry Steinorth, and Laura Van Proyen. More information at lityoungstown.org. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations to these poets and their new books. Chloe Martinez is a poet and scholar of South Asian religions. She is the author of 10,000 Selves, forthcoming from the Word Works. Her poems have appeared or are forthcoming in Ploughshares, Waxwing, Shenandoah, The Common, and elsewhere. She teaches at Claremont McKenna College. Her new book is Corner Shrine, winner of the Backbone Press Chapbook competition, published by Backbone Press. Welcome, Chloe.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you so much for having me. So good to be with you here. Happy to read among you all. Hope the wind and the birds are not too loud in the background. I'm in my yard. I'm here in Southern California. I'm going to read a couple of poems from Corner Shrine. This is my chapbook. It came out in November and with wonderful Backbone Press. And it's a bunch of poems about India, which is a place that I study and have spent a lot of time in, but am also not of. So it's a little bit about negotiating that space of being a traveler, being a tourist, being someone who's studying in a place. That's what some of these poems are about. Some of them are kind of like, I'm going to read one first that came out of research. One of the things I was studying was early autobiography in India. So I was reading a lot of the oldest autobiographies I could find. One of them is the memoir of Babur, who was the first of the Mughal emperors, the first guy to kind of take over and start an empire in India. But he wasn't from India. And if you read his memoirs, he actually didn't like it there very much. He wanted to go back to Central Asia, where he was from. So this is a poem about that. Babur at Agra. Having conquered the subcontinent, the emperor was lonely for the cool Afghani hills, the windy plains of Mongolia, the hanging gardens of Kabul. So, although he had palaces in Delhi, he told his architects to make him proper gardens planned in accordance with the layout as best they could estimate of paradise. Attention was paid to symmetry, to holy numbers, and he requested cool baths, shade-giving trees, and those flowers that fill the air with sweetness at night. When it was done, the emperor's servants brought a brocaded chaise, a carpet patterned with birds. On hot afternoons, he received guests in the shade on the terrace nearest the river to catch the breeze. At night, he walked the fragrant pathways, thinking of when he slept in the open air. This book also has kind of more autobiographical poems. They come out of many, many years of spending time learning and studying in India. One of the first times I went there, I was on study abroad. So this is a poem that actually I wrote after I was doing like an outdoor poetry festival, writing poems on demand, and someone said, write a poem about a learning experience. It's called Learning Experience. After I fell from the moving train, the door opened, someone falling against me, and then my own fall out the door and onto the concrete platform of Mathura Junction Station. I landed, hard, breaking my jaw and several teeth, the crunch sounding inside my head, a sound I can never forget. I was traveling alone in India because I was an 18-year-old idiot. When you ask me to write about a learning experience, this is what comes to mind, the blue, blue silence of the sky. The alarmed faces of passers-by, the trains that kept on coming, then going away. I sat bleeding on a bench for a long time. A man gave me his handkerchief and I held it against my face. Another man handed me my own tooth and walked away. No one else did much for me there, but how lucky I was, luckier than most. I could not speak, but no one put me in a cage. Silent, enraged, I threw my tooth on the dirty tracks. I took the next train home. Okay, I'm gonna read two newer poems now because I'm in the weird position after many years of not having a book. I have two coming out in 2 years, which is not something I expected, especially in a pandemic. So my forthcoming collection is called 10,000 Selves. It has some of these India poems from Corner Shrine and lots of other ones. It's much more about being kind of in the thick of motherhood, I guess, and the mess of it. I have two little kids. My daughters are 5 and 10 now. So this poem I'm going to read is from that manuscript. It's called Mandala of the Mountain Path. And it was also published in the PEN Review, which is a great magazine. Okay, Mandala of the Mountain Path. The monk goes to bed early, rises pre-dawn, his robes identical to other monks' robes. His routine fixed and spacious, meditate, study, consume a small meal, perhaps, and rest. The monk is not sharing his bed with a preschooler who is fully potty trained this week, I hope. My in-laws went to Tibet, brought us back a framed photograph of the Patala Palace. It hangs in the bathroom. The impossible Himalayan peaks, the sharp, whitewashed walls, the garlands of stairways leading up to another world. The monk sits on cushions on the floor, his posture and breath perfected over time. He need not squeeze in a mammogram before daycare pickup. His mind is clear. I imagine it that way anyway. Nothing against the monk. His path is hardly an easy one. The icy air up there, the leader in exile, the palace turned museum, the yellow silk robe with its empty sleeves folded on the golden throne. But sometimes I am thinking a thought, and then my husband and children all shout at once they have misplaced the things they need right now, and only I can find them. Nothing for it, no way to be good enough to make much progress through the triple worlds. The dishes always waiting to be washed, though I hardly even cook. My husband cooks and cooks. The dishwasher is small. Loaded like someone climbing a steep path. Each dish placed gingerly all the way up to the top. The round dome of the temple, the spinning prayer wheel, the clean wind whipping the bright flags ragged. Okay, I'm gonna read one more from the forthcoming collection. As you can see, the poems in the new book are sort of, they're engaged a little bit still with India and with ideas from Indian religions, which is what I study and teach. I teach classes on South Asian religions, Intro to Hinduism, Intro to Sikhism. This is normally what I'm doing in my work life. I actually don't teach poetry classes so much. So I've been thinking a lot about spiritual progress and the ways in which religious traditions offer all these avenues to kind of thinking your way into the future, thinking about the way you might change your life or the way you might get in touch with higher powers, right? All that stuff that religions do. And of course, I've been thinking a lot about how that does and doesn't apply to women often. That's a little bit what that last poem was coming out of. I think maybe it needs more context. I'm going to read just one more, I think. This is a poem that came out of the year before lockdown when I was going to lots of field trips with my daughter who's in Girl Scouts. But it's a poem that was inspired by a Joy Harjo poem, and it's a poem that I've come back to this week because I'm in the middle of the kind of chaotic part of my semester. Everything is wrapping up. There's a lot to do in my final weeks of teaching. And we're in a weird time, I think, too, of coming out of pandemic isolation and figuring out how to come back into the world. I don't know about you all, but for me, that's very stressful. It seems like something I was looking forward to all this year, and also it feels pretty terrifying. So when I was thinking about what I wanted to read today, I thought this is a poem that might be comforting to me, maybe to you too. And this is in the new book, and it also came out in this really great magazine called Relief, a journal of art and faith. It came out last year. It's called At Red Bucket Equine Rescue, Chino Hills, California. And it has an epigraph, which is a line from Joy Harjo. The line is, The heart is the smaller cousin of the sun. And I'll read that again because it's so great. The heart is the smaller cousin of the sun by Joy Harjo. And this is at Red Bucket Equine Rescue. Maybe your horse heart was abandoned some time ago. Maybe it was beaten with a broomstick or left to whittle itself down in hunger to a set of ribs rolling under a dull coat. Even our history of violence may be redeemable. The heart waits, hot, dusty, and barely breathing. Go with a bucket. Wash the heart gently. Feed it up. It will in time grow sleek and healthy again. If it fears you, be infinitely patient. Wait each day with a gift. If it mourns or ruminates on the past, place a long-eared donkey at all times beside it. A donkey is the best helpmate and companion to your bruised heart. Day in and day out together, they seek the shade, they eat. One morning, they attempt a gentle trot around the enclosure. The heart is the smaller cousin of the sun, says Joy. Does it feel heavy? Is it panicky, bucking under your shirt? Have patience. Your heart is at home in your chest. Let it rest there. The burning you feel is not hatred of your enemies, not a reaction to eating too many chilies, not the planet warming, though all those things are there. The burning you feel is your knowledge of everything, your momentous life, your heat, your heart. It all means you mean something. It makes you make meaning. If it hurts, be still a while. Your heart galloping, panting like a herd of wild horses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Quintin Collins is a writer, editor, and Solstice MFA Program Assistant Director. His work appears in various publications, and his second collection, Claim Tickets for Stolen People, winner of the Wheeler Prize, is forthcoming in 2022. His new book is The Dandelion Speaks of Survival, published by Cherry Castle Publishing. Welcome, Quintin.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you, Chloe, for that brilliant reading, and looking forward to hearing Meg read as well. So I'm going to open with a few poems from the first part of The Dandelion Speaks of Survival, and then I'm going to transition to the second part because I feel like I'm sadly always in a topical moment where there's some things that are always worth addressing. So this first poem is called Hear That Bass. A Caprice Classic subwoofer rattles Ravenslow Terrace, vibrates homes. Wheels creep, cruise behind you. You walk home from model car club at school, breath held, wait for the Chevy to stop. This car is not just a car when it coasts, stalks close like fingers pulled into a fist. A neighbor's Impalas found propped up on blocks. A neighbor robbed at gunpoint before he had his morning coffee. That rattle unsettled your mother's voice when she no longer worried about milk carton portraits. Started to warn you about chalk outlines and guns to your head. That same vibration shook you when a Chicago boy turned Country Club Hills held you down, cocked an index finger to your forehead, said he would kill you. In your chest, that thump lives. The Caprice Classic booms into your peripheral vision. Chrome rims snatch sunlight. You tense your muscles to run. Hair raises on your neck. A window descends. The car doesn't stop. It rolls past you, its music a ripple and hum down Ravenslow. You hear that bass all the way home. And this next poem is called This Is Where You Belong, and it's very much an introduction to my childhood landscape of being in the Chicago suburbs and what that kind of does for the culture of the area you're in, and also what happens when you're kind of on the other end of gentrification happening in the city and how your neighborhood starts to transition. This is where you belong. Where the Sears Tower casts a shadow across the land, this is 25 miles southwest of Chicago. A wheat field cleared for a billboard that announces an outlet mall that never broke ground. And this is the Zenon J. Saikuda Elementary School, playground where kids broke skin against mulch. Splinters swam in blood, boys kissed girls, lips sweated with dares. And this is Atkin Park, where a sock swaddled padlock swung an eviction notice to an eye, blood-speckled hopscotch squares. And this is Chris's backyard, where concrete chipped knuckles, where boys chased the jump ball, shared sweat, put up shots for games of 21, wobbled defenders. And this is the creek ditch where victims emptied pockets of a few bills, Pokemon cards, and fruities. Big Mo pedaled away on someone's mongoose. He always said he was coming back. And this is Costner Avenue, where kids flew downhill on that same bike, arms extended, winds coasted over palms. And this is another U-Haul truck going, and this is another U-Haul truck coming. And this is another U-Haul truck with a belly full of furniture, engine idled for arrival or departure. And this is a for sale sign. And this is a for rent sign. And this is a for rent sign. And this is the street light on 180th, outside St. Emmerich, where Keith's mom whooped him in front of all of his friends because sunset, then stars, beat him to his doorstep. And this is a Cutlass Supreme with 24-inch rims that rippled bass down Ravislow Terrace, up Ottawa Drive. And this is Country Pantry. That's the AMC Lowe's. That's the Walmart where teens posted up in the parking lot, lorded around their mother's sedans, revved their hips to summer hits. This is Country Club Hills, where I-57 and I-80 lace like fingers interlocked over the city. The American flag, 250 pounds of polyester, flaps over the land. And this poem is called Advantage Out. No man's land, or the abyss between baseline and service line, or the span between school and home, or the stretch of street where an Impala creeps in front of you as you walk home from a tennis match. Racket handle gripped, you get ready to crack skulls with the forehand, a volley across the face of any fool who fucks with you. You have it laid out like an overhead. They don't know you're pissed off from a loss to a white boy who gloated throughout the game, slung his private education around the court. Truthfully, your team sucks. It's only love between you black boys in your rimless courts, but at least once a match, you serve up an ace or break ankles with a drop shot. Or you make a proud white boy dance then dive to the ground because he kept talking shit. You still lost. You still shook his hand. You wanted to backhand the arrogance out his mouth. You didn't follow through with aggression. You gathered your gear. You walked home. You made a foot fault. Stepped on the line of sight of the wrong people, advantage out, and they're up by 5, all packed in the Impala. One steps out, says, "Niggas play tennis now?" He serves you a punch to the side of the head. You want to slice upside his face, but you play a singles game. And they might have a knife or a gun in the car. He walks back, says, "Art the ashy nigga?" You stand still like a second serve sailed past you. And this poem is called Angry While Black, and it opens with an epigraph from Hanif Abdurraqib, and it says, "I would like my anger to live in the world as your anger does, reasonably, with expectations that it doesn't make me who I am." The day after Charlottesville, where white supremacists marched through America yet again, when I heard there were good people on all sides, you told me I was too angry. You told me I took it too seriously and needed to relax when neo-Nazi flags and tiki torches bobbled in procession, when racism lockstepped on my social media timelines. You didn't know white boys chased my mother to bus stops, pelted her with rocks. You didn't know another one slung nigger out a car window when I walked into work. I say this plainly. With opportunity, they will shoot me in the face. You will not silence me when daily I am cornered. I will elevate my voice until every room edge has felt my echoes. I will churn the tornado in my mouth until it scrapes this country clean. This poem is called Traffic Stop Blues. Blue lights swarm the car as we drive home. Blue lights stop the car as we drive home. We pull off to the shoulder, unaware what we've done wrong. Flashlights demand our hands where officers can see. Officers request our hands where they can see. One cop talks to the driver, the other talks to me. They point to a taillight, a hole no bigger than a nickel. They say the taillight has a hole much bigger than a nickel. They ask us for ID, their hands cradle their pistols. They interrogate us about guns in the car, drugs, and past felonies. They ask if anything's in the car, whether they have reason to worry. They ask where we're from, where we're going, and where we should be. They talk to us like we're boys with their shields and their guns. They think we're just boys, flash their shields, flash their guns. They don't want us to resist their questions, even laugh to make it fun. The cops give a warning, keep their guns at their sides. They let us off with the warning, their guns at their sides. We say thank you, officers, because tonight we don't want to die. And this poem is called The Data Says America Burns. The data slithered through the umbilical cord. It breached the placenta, foretold floods of misfortune in the amniotic fluid. Kicking and screaming, the data met light. My mother swaddled the decimal point latched to her breast, infant body cupped like a comma curve between digits. When I was a toddler, the data dismantled an electrical outlet. It was curious how the world worked. Older data knew already, so it burned Los Angeles for 5 days while I said my first sentences. The data started to count and stopped when I was 6. My grandfather smoked cigarettes until statistics smothered his lungs with tumors. This time, Florida went up in flames. One summer night, everything black but security lights, the data struck a match, lit a cigar, and handed it to my father. My mother said it was a gift from his friends at my birth. The data spiraled from the lit tip like smoke, my father a shadow in the dark. In school, teachers warned about the data. Some students already had mouths full of percent signs. Their tongues clicked like tickers. When I met those kids on the wrong block on the wrong day, the data kept a knee on my spine. Cincinnati smoldered. And then America crackled on a jet fuel bonfire. Wasn't it always embers? Wasn't it always Oakland? The data thought so and slipped a few fingers into my palm when I turned 21. Florida incinerated again. The flames found new kindling, crawled from Ferguson to Cleveland to New York to North Charleston to Baltimore to Waller County to Falcon Heights. 1 in every, 2 in every, 3 in every, 4 in every. The data spilled tens and hundreds and thousands and millions into streets. At 27, I talked with my wife about counting down from 9. And the statistic said, remember, I rode shotgun when cops stopped you in Chicago. In California, a new blaze sparked in Sacramento, and I tried to tally the tip of each flame. So I'm just going to read 2 more, and this first one is called Dear White People, Don't Ask Us How to Stop It. Don't ask us to undrown brown faces saltwater bloated across the Atlantic. We were born with mouths full of police tape and cotton. Don't ask us to speak wisdom on how to un-Jim Crow our bodies, our words, ghosted in grandparents who ask why their grandchildren, children who ask why their parents fear they walk in blue, moonlight in 2 white neighborhoods. Our words try to keep our skin from fertilizing gravestones. We're too occupied as we peel back our hoods to police perceptions. Don't ask us how to undead those noose-necked. Ask these bows how they bow to bear our bodies. Ask the body camera playbacks of children talk outlined. Ask the immortalized and memorialized martyrs, Twitter hashtags, protester choked traffic that transfigures names into monuments. Ask nigger as it told your tongue's edge. Ask the melanin bleached and burned. Ask the skin. Ask ashes of every black church set ablaze. Ask torches, Confederate flags, Nazi patch parades in our streets. Our hands are too caked in coffin splinters to bury more of these bones. If you still don't know how to stop racism, ask yourself. And his final poem is called The Difference Between Nigger and Nigga. Not the hard R or the soft R or the mouth that frees the syllables. Not the sneer or the smile or skin color of the speaker, not whips on skin. Not whips that roll on spinning rims, not whispers among white friends when black friends don't hear. Not words weaved in hugs between black friends. Not bodies bound at ankles and wrists and necks. Not bodies that brandish gold chains. Not rappers who pull flows from a desert. Not white boys who pull the word like a parachute. Not asterisks that smother the brutality of language. Not the N-word or radio edits that record scratch explicit speech. Not Cat Williams or Chris Rock or Richard Pryor or pre-2006 Paul Mooney. Not Bill Maher or Louis C.K. or Michael Richards or George Carlin. Not the epithet emblazoned on a high school bathroom stall or walls around LeBron's home. Not Tarantino's lack of dead nigger storage. Not nigga please spouted from Show Nuff to Bruce Leroy to express disbelief. Not the disbelief that the word can float like a brick. Not the phrase floated for anger, intimacy, or all of the above. Not the difference between two spellings. Not the knowledge that history is heavier than a textbook. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Quintin. Meg Kearney is the author of An Unkindness of Ravens and Home by Now, winner of the PEN New England L.L. Winship Award, the chapbook The Ice Storm, 3 verse novels for teens, and an award-winning picture book, Trouper. Her new book is All Morning the Crows, winner of the Washington Prize, published by the WordWorks. Welcome, Meg.
Thank you so much, Karen and Lit Youngstown for hosting us today. And it's such a great pleasure and honor to read with Quintin and Chloe. So thank you both for those readings. It's amazing stuff, and I can't wait for us to talk about the poems a little bit more. I'm gonna open with a poem by kind of one of my poetry mothers, somebody who keeps me going over the years, Lucille Clifton. This is from her The Book of Light, and it's a short poem called Climbing. A woman precedes me up the long rope, her dangling braids the color of rain. Maybe I should have had braids. Maybe I should have kept the body I started, slim and possible as a boy's bone. Maybe I should have wanted less. Maybe I should have ignored the bowl in me, burning to be filled. Maybe I should have wanted less. The woman passes the notch in the rope marked 60. I rise toward it, struggling, hand over hungry hand. Lucille. So I'm excited to read kind of from this book that's really just out or just coming out. Officially it's June 1, but you can get it now. So All Morning the Crows, and it's not just crow poems. It's 52 different birds, I guess. So each poem basically is the name of a bird, even though they're not really all about birds. Birds are kind of the launching point. So I'm gonna start with Meadowlark. It's kind of a not so happy faux love story. Meadowlark. What the meadowlarks were doing back in Wyoming, while he diddled in the Blue Ridge, she considered much later. At that mountain retreat, the air was sweet with briars and time unfurling, and so their cast lines tangled. Thoughts of meadowlarks, those superhero yellow breasts marked by triangles of black, came only after he didn't head back west, but followed her home to New York. After the lone winters, the roses dried in a bowl, roses color of red wine once it's turned. Popcorn blossomed, then burned on the stove as he said, "I'm your man now, quit your job, I've got dinner covered." She could feel one eyebrow rise like a flag. He in his mind still living in Thailand, 1981, where the Hmong thought him a savior. He could have been, she first supposed. It was a romantic thought, like his meadowlark's fluty morning melodies hovering above the prairie, or like the roses, which never did open. He was a Rhodes Scholar in denim, a dentist's son, a cowboy complete with guitar, waistline beginning to thicken. And surely, once his father died, he was too damn grief-stricken to work, seeing as she still had hers. He and his guitar might as well head to the bar where somebody's bound to know my horses ain't hungry, while west in Wyoming, meadowlarks nest in the hoof prints of stallions. That's a real fact, a detail the city crowd eats up. Details like frisbees in Central Park, a fast way to make friends. It was details that lured him downtown that day the towers fell. He left her with a dead phone line, cell useless too, but she had time then for her penny whistle and of course the view. Not having a horse, he rode his bike as far as McDougal or maybe J Street. The day still sickly sunny above the cloud of humans hovering there. New ghosts don't care for voyeurs lured by tragedy. Buoyant as meadowlarks, they glided in low, made sure he breathed in a lungful. That's what she imagined from her 12th story perch. That's when his stories lost their gleam. Later, she heard him describe that day as if it happened just to him. By then, she knew things aren't always what they seem. A meadowlark isn't a lark at all, but cousin to the blackbird. A detail he'd delete from his tales of cowboy glory, as he was loath to let a fact ruin a good story. Warbler. And this is set, I'm in New Hampshire now, left New York in 2005. And for many years, though, for more than 30 now, I've spent much of the month of August up in the White Mountains, and a lot of these poems were actually drafted up there near Franconia and Franconia Notch. This is Warbler. By early winter, the warbler is gone, but its song lingers the way a hike up Cannon Mountain lingers in the knees, or the smell of smoke hovers in the cabin on foggy mornings, embers cool and damp even like the newspaper and her books. She should have headed south by now too, soon, when she runs out of wood, scrounging for kindling at the forest's edge, sitting wrapped in a blanket where sun hits the porch. She hears that bird at the oddest times. Please, please, pleased to meet you, this afternoon as she's headed to the spring with her jug. The dog doesn't seem to notice, for here is the path blazed by deer to where they drink. Maybe the dog's company isn't enough. She's hearing things. Or, like her, one bird has stayed past all warnings. There it is again. From the porch, she can't see the mountains. It's snowing in the notch. We should go now, she tells the dog. Black as the top of Cannon is white, he settles on the hearthrug. She crisscrosses sticks over crumpled paper, finds matches in the little blue cupboard. when I was trying to figure out which poems to read today, I was thinking about Quintin's and Chloe's poems and how like centered on place they are. So I thought, all right, let me pick out some of the poems that are kind of, centered in place. So this one takes us totally to a different place. This is Penguins. I was interested in learning that the male emperor penguin actually incubates a single egg on his feet. So the males they hold the egg on their feet and against their abdomen, and where they have a brood patch. And all these male, father penguins with their eggs that they're incubating are waiting for these mother penguins to return with food. And sometimes they're waiting for months without eating anything. So that really struck me. And there was an explorer who sailed with Francis Drake to Patagonia back in the 16th century. And he described these penguins that were walking so upright that far off a man would take them to be little children. And of course, back then, and for many hundreds of years, men were probably the penguins' #1 enemy. Penguins. This is a pantoum. They looked like little children standing upright on the shore. The sailors said, still at sea. All were hungry under that frozen sun. Standing upright on the shore, a cluster of fathers and their chicks. All were hungry under that frozen sun, waiting for the mother penguin's return. The cluster of fathers and their chicks didn't see the sailors land. Waiting for the mother penguin's return, they'd survived brutal nights, furious blizzards. They didn't see the sailors land, axes, knives, and clubs in hand. They'd survived brutal nights, furious blizzards, the stunning tales of killer whales. Axes, knives, and clubs in hand, the sailors made quick work of slaughter. The stunning tales of killer whales, wolves' teeth, nothing had ever slain so many. The sailors made quick work of slaughter. How many dead penguins could a ship hold? Wolves, whales, nothing had ever slain so many. What haunts sailors' dreams? Penguins huddled on shore. How many dead penguins a ship can hold? The sailors said, back at sea. What haunts sailors' dreams? Still huddled on shore, penguins look like little children. I'm just going to read 2 more. So let's go to France now. Southern France, where I witnessed these amazing flamingos. So this is set in the Camargue, which is a wetlands and wildlife refuge that sits south of Arles, France, between the Mediterranean Sea and the 2 arms of the Rhone Delta. It's home to more than 400 species of birds, including flamingos, which feed on the brine ponds that are found there. And it's also home to this famous breed of horses named for the Camargue that are ridden by cowboys called guardians, which I don't speak French, so I'm not going to put you through that. I tried to say it correctly. Flamingo. She flees to the Camargue, where shrimp turns flamingos a deep pink hue. Locals claim mosquitoes, those phony birds, balloon big enough and mean enough to carry them all away. That is her desire, escape. But the 1,000 flames lighting up the marsh on yellow matchstick legs seems so American. I have flown to France to land in Disney, she complains, and there rides a cowboy in spurs just to prove it. She's had enough of cowboys, real and wannabes, or anything that turns its head upside down to eat. What she needs lies in the nearby village, St. Mary's by the sea, where rumors of a miracle and a famed gypsy liquor bring her to her knees. And I'm just going to read one last one. House finch. So now we're in Long Island, New York, in the year 1940. So in 1940, house finches were captured illegally in California. So we have a California connection with Chloe, and imported to New York by these dealers, these stolen bird dealers, and then they came close to getting caught apparently, and they let loose all these house finches on Long Island to avoid persecution, and lots of house finches in New York State now. This is house finch 1940. Most arrived in wood and wire cages, some in brass domes, all to be sold as pets to lovers under umbrellas packed spoke to spoke on Jones Beach, or to the Smiths of Smithtown enjoying their backyard beer and barbecue afternoons. Soon the house finch, let loose, would populate the East just as the Smiths and Joneses were doing, copulating like good Catholics until even the gulls couldn't compete. But that summer, 1940, Hollywood finches were as exotic as Mai Tais, another splash of California color newly arrived to the North Shore. There, the Smiths still preferred their Budweiser and Irish whiskey, but they did applaud the release of the finches. My first mother was a young girl then, maybe 30 inches tall, barely big enough to fetch Papa Smith a beer. She had nothing to fear, warbling around the yard like a bird. She didn't yet know how a cage can spring up around you, spirit you away and alone. She didn't yet know that once the door clicks shut behind you, there's no going home. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Meg.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Chloe, would you like to open the conversation?
Sure. Those readings were so terrific. So good to hear them. Thank you, Meg, and thank you, Quintin. I have questions for both of you, but I'm just going to start maybe with, I have a question for you, Quintin. I was reading your book and thinking a lot about ordering, maybe because I'm sort of starting to work on my next collection after the one that's coming out, and thinking a lot about, again, how do you make poems into a narrative, a shape, right? How do you turn from working on that small space of a single poem to the big space of the book? And I was really interested in the kind of structure that I saw in your book of the sections, but also these voices of the Dandelion speaks and all these other speakers that are coming in the last section. You've got all these autobiographical, sort of like these very wonderfully like vulnerable kind of like childhood, young adulthood poems in the first section. And of course, you're braiding together all this, all of personal experience, political, current events. You're braiding together a lot of important things in one space here, and you do it with such deftness. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your process of organizing this collection or how it found its shape.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And the first part was easy because that was like, okay, I just need to arrange this chronologically based on age for the most part. So that was the easy part. Because there are certain poems that are more clearly, elementary school age, and then ones that are more clearly high school. So I wanted to make sure I maintain that kind of progression because the overarching arrangement of the book was that the first part's in second person for a very dissociated speaker, where we have that switch in POV for the second, and so I kind of had to drive toward that. So it had to be this progression of like, where do we start where the speaker starts to feel not part of his place, his home, his body. And then, we don't really get a moment of like, hey, this is the epiphany of like, I'm me, I'm in me, and I'm proud of that. But we had to reach the point where it got the worst, and then we have that transition to the first poem and the second part, where we get a sense that okay, something changed, and now it's a very different voice. So yeah, the first part was a little bit easier, but the second part was very much about modulation because I wanted to have a mix of two, kind of ways of that same speaker now embracing the I, embracing the we, um, really owning that on the side of, righteous anger and the side of, joy. So I was like, I have to mix it up a bit. So it took a bit to determine which poems are going where based on that, particularly where I wanted to start and then where I wanted to end. And the funny thing is, the first poem of the collection actually was the last. And that switch was actually a suggestion from my editor at Cherry Castle. And I was like, that's so cool. And it's like great because, the poem was published by Tramset and was getting a lot of traction. I was like, yeah, I see why now. But I was like, damn, now I have to figure out how to end this book again. So that's going to be fun. But yeah, it was definitely just a point of like thinking about, I don't want to have too many poems that are angry in a row and too many poems that are joyful in a row. I want to kind of like modulate where I can. And then within that, it was thinking about, okay, what's happening? Is it something about food? Is it something about family? Is it something about race relations in this country? Is it, whatever those little themes were? And the first ever time I arranged this, and this was back when I was a student in Solstice MFA, it was taking sticky notes of different colors and putting them on the wall with the different 6 or 8 sub themes of the entire book, and basically making sure that I didn't have too many sticky notes in one place of the same color. And then from there, everything else was just kind of like, we'll see what happens when the poems happen. But thematically, it was just titles on sticky notes and making sure the colors were fine.
That's cool.
That's so cool. Thank you. And that's really good to hear about. And I think it really works. You braid all, not only all of the topics of the book, but I do think those moods and feelings of the book, they really modulate beautifully. Should I ask another question? So should I take it to the next person? Karen, what would you like us to do?
Whatever you like. That's fine.
Yeah, I can pop in with another one. I actually have a question for both of you, and I guess I'll start with Meg and then go to Chloe. So one of the great things about all of our work is we do some time traveling, which is great, especially in sense of, Meg mentioned that sense of place. And so if you both could just talk about like, how did you get into the space of yourself so many years ago and then recreate, whatever that landscape is that you're speaking to, whether it is like the actual environment around you or even the headspace of yourself or whomever as a speaker of this time. What is it like when you kind of time travel in your poems? Meg, you first.
One thing that was different with writing this book, different from the others that I've written so far, is that I started it so many years ago, 8, 9 years ago, and then I set it aside and came back to it like 2, 3 years later and picked it up. So that actually made for some time traveling right there, because I was definitely in a much different place, you know? And so I had written like 100 of these bird poems in that first like time of the writing. And when I came back a few years later, I threw out more than half of them, you know? And then there was just some that just like wouldn't come until like very late in the game. So I see that there's what somebody pointed out to me too, like he called it a migration. There's actually like a migration that happens like thematically, but also time-wise in the book. Even the dog in the book, he keeps recurring and aging, but that was actually happening like in real life as I was writing this poem, you know? So, and then, you know, and then there's the getting into the space of, you know, Patagonia in the 16th century, or, you know, or 1940 Long Island, you know, where you're really just kind of, you know, going into, you know, that mode where they say, you know, don't think, dream. You know, I think it was Andre Dubus, the son, who I first heard that from, and it makes so much sense to me, because that's what I tell students now too. You know, it's like, if you can just get in that dream space, you can go anywhere, right? So how about you, Chloe?
This is a really interesting question for me, because yeah, my chapbook definitely moves around in time, and it also, a lot of it was written kind of retrospectively. Some of the poems are about the first time I was in India as a college student on study abroad, when I wasn't really writing poems. And then some of them are written out of later trips when I was going back for dissertation research while I was in my PhD program. And so they're poems that come out of that later trip. They're poems that I probably wrote during or after the later trip, thinking back to some of the earlier times. So I think writing these poems was a really, for me, wonderful exercise, often in imagining myself back into a space where I'd had really transformative experiences, and trying to then think about how they felt now. So I think for me, moving around between the times of the different poems in the book didn't feel difficult at all, because they really were written that way. They were written in different kind of retrospective timeframes. And reading from the book now also has felt, you know, especially the past couple months doing these readings online when I haven't like left my hometown in a full year, has also felt like another kind of like, I get to travel back to these places that I can't be in. So that's been neat for me. But yeah, I really appreciate that question. And I love the way both of your books also really work with and against time. It was interesting, Quinton, to hear you say that the first section, you just wanted to arrange it in a linear way. And it is linear, definitely, but I felt that your collection was moving so easily across time. And Meg, yours as well. There's something so natural in the way the speakers move back and forth between a kind of speaker in the present, speaker imagining this other mother character in the past, you know, poems that are actually set in different times and places. They fit very naturally together. And I really liked that ranging across time and space. I like that migration thing that was happening. It was really neat.
Well, I can jump in here, because what I was thinking about in reading both of yours kind of fits into what you were just saying, especially Chloe, in terms of place. Because I mean, as I said, I see both of your books so, you know, where place is just so central. And you know, you've got Chicago and its suburbs, and then you have India. And I was also struck by the structural correspondence between Quinton's poem, This is Where You Belong. I think you read that. And your poem, Chloe, called Kerala, Kerala. I wanted, and it's funny because those poems are two of my favorites in each of the books. But they are really speaking to each other, you know, that they would be fun poems to have kind of back to back in a magazine or something. But I was wondering with Chloe, like what the role of and work of place is in general for you and your work. And it seems like with this new collection that's coming out this fall, and some of these poems making their way into that. It is quite central. And then with Quintin, I was thinking along these lines, but more toward how in this collection, America is both a place and almost like a persona, like a character in some, and I think you mentioned America in one way or another in like 16 or 17 poems, so I was hoping that you would talk a little bit about the role that America plays in those poems, and then Chloe more kind of generally about place. I don't know if you stay in India in this new book that's coming out this fall, or so I'll mute.
I guess I'll start. Wow, the funny thing about building the landscape of this book was, particularly in the first half, is because that was actually a challenge for me. And getting to the place where this book just kind of, I knew what it was supposed to be, was a series of epiphanies. And one of them was when I was back in Illinois for Christmas visiting family. And I was on the Metro train with my wife when we were going into the city. And I was just thinking about like, wow, like I've never written about taking this train into the city. Like that's a big deal for everybody who lives in these suburbs. Like kids are clamoring to get on these trains and go downtown for the day. And I was like, okay, so here's the central problem with this book I've been trying to write. I am not writing from the perspective of the person who lives in the suburbs. Like I lived in the actual city for 5 years between college and maybe about 9 months after, before I moved to the Boston area. But I was like, I'm not naming the things that are out here. And that's kind of one of the biggest works of This Is Where You Belong. And just the first part of the collection was that I had to learn to trust my readers to either be able to assume well enough that a Caprice Classic is a car, or that I can trust them to Google it, because like I have to name the cars that are out here, because the cars that are out here are very specific for a reason. And it's just all wrapped up in the culture of the area and the time. The early 2000s was a point where everyone wanted a Chevy, because Chevys are what the rappers were talking about. And they were all two-tone, and they all had like 24-inch rims. And I was like, I have to name these particular things. And in that, I think when I got to the point of that poem, like that, This Is Where You Belong is kind of like the poem that really helped me feel into everything else that had to happen. I thought about the fact that in Country Club Hills, I think it's smaller now, which is like very unfortunate. The last time I went home in September, and then we drove past it on the expressway, and I was like, I hate that it's so tiny. I used to hate that it was so huge, but like a gigantic flag. And it's in the same exact area where they were going to put this huge outlet mall, because my hometown's whole thing was being put on the map. Like they wanted to do everything they could to be put on the map. And in lieu of the outlet mall, before that happened, it was this gigantic flag. And I was like, wow, like there's so much happening here between the demographics of where I grew up, the immediate next suburb that is on the map, and it's the white suburb, and the fact that they put this flag right here on the expressway where everyone can see it, and what all that means. And that's kind of where I landed at the idea of like, not only are we in the shadow of the Sears Tower, because you can see the Sears Tower this far out on a clear day, we're in the shadow of this gigantic flag. We're in the middle of, in the literal middle of America, where all these highways where you can go every direction are at. Where I grew up was called the Crossroads of America. That's like our town name. And I was like, all right, so if we are the crossroads of America, and America is this thing, we're at the heart of it. How does that become a person in the work? And how do I, interrogate that? And there's also some poems in there where I try to do my best to also interrogate my own Americanness and the faults that come with it as well. But, it really is weird that I lived at a literal intersections or crossroads that then I hope to address and build within the work.
I love that. And Karen, I see we're really getting close to the end of the hour, so I'll be super quick. I just want to say one that Quintin, I really liked what you said about trusting your audience and thinking about whether people know what kind of car you're talking about, right? That's this interesting problem, right? That we're always writing to our multiple audiences of the people who know all the same stuff we know and people who maybe don't know some of the stuff. I think about it a lot, writing about India for a largely American audience, right? How much do I explain? How much do I expect people to go look up? And I think it's something great that poems can do, is like force us to go learn new things, right? I think, we get tricked into like the world of each other's poems, and then maybe we learn about cars or mandalas or birds. It's like a little side benefit. Just to speak to Meg's question about place briefly, I do think I am a poet who's really very strongly connected to all the places that I've spent a lot of time with. I think that my poetics do come very much out of place, both literal, like natural landscape. I'm here in my garden in my yard, and I'm really interested in that, and also the culture of cities and countries. And I have moved around a lot in the last 10 years between India, the East Coast, the West Coast, a bunch of other places. So yeah, those places have really shaped my work. This chapbook is all about India, and many of those India poems make their way into the new book, but the new book also has lots of California and a smattering of other places. I'm really interested in the way that we shape our identities a little bit around place, and also that being displaced or being rooted in different places, right, can really change the way we feel about ourselves, the way we interact with each other, the way we interact with the world. The way we see ourselves is certainly shaped by the places we're from, but I think when we go to different places, we get to inhabit them in all kinds of different ways. So these India poems for me are a lot about the complexity of what it means to be an American traveling in India, what it means to be sometimes a tourist, sometimes someone who's much more invested in a place than a tourist, but you're still going to be perceived by a tourist. Why I chose to spend so much time in India and not in any other place, right? Why was I drawn to this one place? What does it mean for me? So all of that has been true. And in the new book, I'm writing more about California as a place that I have a complicated relationship with, because I grew up on the East Coast, and California was kind of like a foreign land to me when I moved here, but I've come to love it a lot. So all of that. But anyway, it's been really great to talk with you both and to spend time with your books and to hear you read. And thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Karen, for having us.
Same way. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Until Chloe mentioned it, I was so absorbed in the conversation, I forgot where we were. I wish you all the best with these incredible books, and just good luck to you, good health, and all good wishes. And thank you again.